Hi, everyone. Welcome to the workshop today, Food Justice is Racial and Gender Justice with Hunger Free America and the Black Feminist Project. We'll give everyone just about 1 minute to introduce yourself in the chat, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. Great, so great to see everyone introducing themselves from all over the US, it looks like. NYC, Cincinnati, Albuquerque. Awesome. Well, I'll just briefly introduce myself. Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Maltz. I'm the Strategic Partnerships Coordinator for Hunger Free America. We're so excited to have you all for this really wonderful workshop today. Before we get started with some introductions, I want to begin with a land acknowledgement. I'm speaking from the physical space of New York City, and I'd like to acknowledge the land on which I currently reside, which historically was that of Lenape, Canarsie, Rockaway, and Wappinger Indigenous peoples. We deliver a land acknowledgement to acknowledge the historical legacy of colonialism by honoring and paying respect to the land, which was taken by conquest, along with the domination of the people who inhabited the land and the imposition of white supremacy. We do it to raise greater public consciousness of Native sovereignty and cultural rights, as well as a small step towards equitable relationships and reparation. We encourage the participants on today's call to privately acknowledge the land that sustains and supports you. If you do not already know your area's history, Kayla is going to provide a link in the chat to learn more about the Indigenous peoples that live or lived in your area. Okay, and I'll also just provide a really brief intro to Hunger Free America. So if you are new to HFA, we are a nonpartisan national nonprofit building the movement to enact the policies and programs needed to end domestic hunger and ensure that all Americans have sufficient access to nutritious food. So we do this through both our direct service and advocacy work, which we feel strengthens each other. As the Strategic Partnerships Coordinator, I work on the Strategic Volunteerism team, where we strive to connect individuals and anti-hunger organizations with opportunities for meaningful service that both allow the volunteer to utilize their skills and the organization to build capacity. My team has also been working hard on the programming for this event and all of the events for the Serve-a-Thon. So it's so exciting to see all of this come together. I'm so grateful that everyone's joined today. HFA's work to end hunger is more pressing than ever. According to a report published by HFA in July 2020, I think Kayla just dropped that reference in the chat if anyone wants to look into it, the United States is facing the gravest hunger crisis in modern times. More than 1 in 3 children are missing meals or suffering from reduced portion sizes because their families don't have enough money to buy food. The rate of child hunger is 5 times higher than before the pandemic, and adult hunger is 2.5 times higher. As domestic hunger increases, all types of low-income families are suffering, but data shows that people of color are impacted at higher rates. HFA data shows that in the spring and summer of this year, 41.1% of Black respondent households experienced food insecurity, as did 36.9% of Hispanic respondent households. In contrast, 23.2% of white respondent households experienced food insecurity. As a global pandemic and demands for racial justice collide, it's more important than ever to uplift MLK's message of justice. For over 2 decades, Hunger Free America has honored Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy by coordinating service events and volunteer action supporting long-term solutions to hunger. With this year's Serve-a-Thon, our hope is that volunteers will learn something new, take action in the fight against hunger, as well as take away some ideas on how to continue working towards and supporting a more equitable community. As we begin the workshop today, I'd just finally like to introduce some group norms to frame our dialogue. A safe space is a brave space. We are called to create a brave space where we accept the likelihood that we will be uncomfortable when investigating issues of race, privilege, and oppression, as well as our roles within them. We invite you to work to recognize your privileges. Use this space to recognize and investigate your privileges, For example, class, gender, sexual orientation, or ability. Honor the different experiences we all bring to this space. We ask folks to take risks today, lean into discomfort, as we are all in process. Challenge yourself to contribute, even if it is not perfectly formulated. And finally, actively listen. Use your energy to listen to what is said before thinking about how to respond. Notice when defensiveness and denial arise. We also invite anyone, if they have any additional group norms to add, feel free to add them in the chat. Wonderful. So today's workshop is titled Food Justice is Racial and Gender Justice, the intersections of race, gender, and food insecurity. To speak on these topics, I'd like to introduce our speakers, Samra Schwabe, Deputy Director, Stephanie Cardoso Parker, Food Box Coordinator, Tanya Denise Fields, Executive Director and Founder, and Justin Mashia, the Black Joy Farm Manager. Tanya, would you please tell us a bit more about the Black Feminist Project and the work that you all do there?
Hey, hi everyone. So my name is Tanya Denise Fields. I am often referred to as Mama Tanya. I started the Black Feminist Project as the Black Project 10 years ago, really as a response to much of the experiences that I had in one of the poorest congressional districts in the country, the Southeast Bronx. And what people really a lot of times think about the Bronx when they hear the Bronx. First of all, let me just digress a little bit by saying that the Bronx is the largest borough in New York City. It has a rich culture, and it is not monolithic. But oftentimes when folks think about the Bronx, and y'all can just sort of put in the chat, I would love for people to put in the chat, and my feelings don't hurt easy. When you hear the Bronx, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Just 1 or 2 words about what you think about when you hear the Bronx. And I'm looking in the chat. So someone said hip hop. Yes, definitely hip hop. What else do we think about? Good food, yes. Black and brown people, absolutely. Black culture, bodegas, yep. Loud. Okay, now we get into it. 161st Street. I live on 167th. Green space in Parkland. Well, that's pretty recent. I'm some of y'all trying to be nice here, but this is not what the vast majority, and a lot of y'all probably are from the Bronx too. So you want to see us in the best possible light. But the reality is crime, ghetto. Yes, this is what people think when they think the Bronx. When I travel abroad and tell people I'm from the Bronx, people in their worst English will ask me about whether or not if you go there, will you get robbed? Are there a lot of gangs? Like, this is still persistent, right? At this point in the 21st century, we are still having to combat these stereotypes. And the Bronx does have its fair share of issues, right? But that's also why it's such an amazingly culturally rich place, because we know that a lot of times from such challenges is where you get, the most innovative, cultural innovations and social contributions and, trendiness. And so Uptown in the Bronx is definitely home to that. But when I first moved here, almost 20 years ago, because I came to the Bronx being gentrified from Harlem as a lifelong Harlem resident up until that point. I came to the Bronx 18 years ago. I was faced with challenges such as poor air quality. I was faced with the challenges of lack of access to quality, affordable, nutrient-dense food. I was navigating serious transportation issues because I didn't have a car. And here I am 20 years later, and many of those same issues persist. And so in around 2005 or so, I started getting involved with the social justice movement, primarily around environmental justice, air quality, because I had a severely asthmatic, and she's still severely asthmatic at 16 years old, but at the time she was an infant, and she's severely asthmatic. She's being hospitalized quite often. She's on prednisone, which is a very strong steroid that has some really serious side effects. And I found a organization called Mothers on the Move. and very quickly got involved with them, and graduated college and thought that a good job was just going to fall like manna from the heavens. And that didn't happen. What I found myself navigating were a lot of corporate spaces, where you have to sort of try to circumvent, and subvert microaggressions, and what I like to call what Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum, who wrote Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria, calls passive racism, right? So that's not racism where you walk in and someone's going to use the N word with the hard R, but that is about white folks who will continue to close ranks around oppressive systems that benefit them, but come at the expense of your livelihood. And I found myself navigating that, but not having the language for what I was experiencing. And through my interactions with Mothers on the Move and being hired as a full-time organizer at Sustainable South Bronx, I was given the language. And that was important. That meant everything. That changed the trajectory of my life. And I said to myself, what would happen if more women, more Tanyas, right? Who wanted to get involved, who didn't know where to start, who knew, what was happening to them was wrong, but didn't know the why of why it was happening. What if they were empowered? And I struggle with that word because there's a paternalistic connotation to it, because I think that we all inherently possess power. But what if they were affirmed in their power? And not only were they affirmed in their power, what if they were given the tools and the resources to make the decisions that best serve them and their children? Because I was keenly interested in working with Black mothers, right? And Black children. Because when we talk about the things that we're experiencing in this community, we are talking about poverty. At the end of the day, all of this other stuff, they're branches. They are branches on a tree, and that tree is deeply, deeply rooted in poverty. And in order to do that, we have to call a thing. And we have to call that thing, we have to understand that that thing has intersections, and we have to understand that who's standing at those intersections, who are the most negatively impacted, are Black women. And so Black women and femmes need to be at the forefront of leading these movements. And so we started with urban farming. And we created Libertad Urban Farm, which has now been renamed as Black Joy Farm. And that was like a 6-year-long campaign to find a little patch of dirt somewhere to grow eggplant and peppers and apples and all that kind of stuff. And then from there, we just continued to refine our analysis. And what we really felt like were the two biggest intersections, because at the end of the day, all of this is about dismantling white supremacy. All of this is about dismantling the systems that are propped up by white supremacy. And at those intersections really are food justice and reproductive justice. And so that's where our work really lies, at those two intersections. And so we have some prominent programming that we're working on. The food program, which is our food box program, which Stephanie is leading now and is reworking and is growing. Our urban agriculture program, which Justin is now the head of. Our Sis Do You program, which is part of our larger reproductive justice campaign. And now with us getting access to a 2,000 square foot storefront, used to be an old church, which I think is ironic, where we will be opening the Alice Fields Community Center, which is literally going to be our anchor, which is our brick and mortar space, which is a bold and safe and courageous space that amplifies and centers the lived experiences and brilliance of Black women, girls, and what we call marginalized genders. Because we know that gender is not a binary, it is a spectrum. And so just to keep it brief, that's in a nutshell. There's so much more nuance, and I'm sure that we'll get into all those things as we get into the meat of this panel. So.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing and just giving an overview before, as you say, we kind of dig into the meat and potatoes of the panel. So I'll pose a question and let me know, feel free. anyone on the panel to jump in. But, we're here for the MLK Serve-a-Thon. So I'll just start with asking, what does Martin Luther King Jr.'s work and legacy mean to you?
Come on, staff. I've already talked for 19 minutes. This is where y'all jump in. Don't be shy.
So today I'm actually taking this day to reflect a lot on what MLK Day means, but also uh how far we've come, but how far we haven't come since he started. MLK was doing this work, right? And I think people pre-Trump people really thought we were in a post-racial America, and I think Trump really was jarring in the way that it brought America's true colors to light, but that it was never any different, right? Trump is really essentially what America has always been, right? But he's just doing it outwardly. So I think when I think of this day, I think of his legacy. I'm thinking about all the work he did, or all the work the Black women behind his movement did, but really how much work still needs to be done. I'm really reflecting on days where it feels like we haven't progressed much in terms of like supporting Black women, supporting Black folks, poor Black folks. And I was actually reading up on this article today that said that MLK got assassinated at the time where he started speaking outwardly more towards about the wealth gap between for Black communities, right? And so I think that's something we often don't think about. His critique is capitalism, right, which is the root of all cause, and capitalism being like this disease that's still infecting us. And I think this goes into layers of how food justice operates, or how gender justice operates. But when I'm thinking about his legacy, I'm really just thinking about, we are still in a very anti-Black, white supremacist America, and how much work there is still that needs to be done.
For me, I feel like Martin Luther King Day, which is a day of service, um, for me now feels like the day where white people get to feel really good about being liberal white people. Um, I'm sorry, I'm always the person who's gonna say some shit that has everybody like, oh God, here she go. Because we talk about MLK now like he is a deity, honey. He is Saint Martin Luther King Jr., right? But he was hated. He was disliked, including by a lot of Black people who felt like this crazy so and so is out here stopping traffic, like the same people who will talk about how Black Lives Matter shouldn't shut down the whole highway will also talk about, and Martin Luther King Jr. And I'm like, he has become this sort of catch-all and sort of almost in a way deflection and sort of gaslighting for people to silence Black people. But even though he was a pacifist, he was also extremely radical. And I think that gets lost. And it was not a coincidence that he was assassinated around the time where he really started to understand the intersections, that capitalism really is the tool that has pushed forward racism in America, right? And that we cannot be about dismantling anti-Black racism if we are not about dismantling capitalism, because capitalism is inherently anti-Black. And so for me, this day is always very frustrating as a radical Black woman, because folks who are generally silent all year, or who have said some questionable stuff about the ways in which Black folks assert themselves radically, will now trot out Martin Luther King as if he is the holy grail of all that is about of dismantling racism, because his message of pacifism gets overblown, and because he was a proponent of integration, without having an analysis on the fact that we didn't achieve what Martin Luther King wanted. We don't have integration. What we have is desegregation, and those two things are very, very different.
This day for me, I don't know. I think the life and legacy of Martin Luther King is, for me, it's still. It was always, as a child growing up, I always wondered, like, asking my parents, like, really, like, he wanted equality, but why are we not equal? Like, and here I am, so many years later as an adult, and we haven't achieved equality in so many different ways. And I find it to be interesting when I talk to white coworkers of mine, and they're like, oh, but look, like, we're all equal now. And I was like, where are you living? Where like, what America are you in? Like, what happened at the Capitol? I don't think that was anything that was new to most Black people. Like, it wasn't like that eye-opening to us. We were just sitting back watching it, like, oh, is eye-opening to those who were looking at America, I guess, through rose-colored glasses. But it wasn't anything. I actually had the opportunity to meet Coretta Scott King. I was a little kid. I got the ability to meet her. And I just remember I was too nervous to even speak, because to me, she was just this, you grow up reading these books about, and all your history books, and you have Martin Luther King, and then you see Coretta Scott King, and to know that she was the strong force, behind her, and how she, even after he was gone, like, she led these movements, and she was there the whole entire time behind the scenes, a lot of times, and did a lot of things that people don't know. But I got off on a whole, I lost where I was going. But this day, to me, is in some ways still angering for me, for his dream, because to me, there's no way in 2021 we should still be where we are.
Yeah, so I kind of agree with what everybody said, but I feel like at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that's not changed that needs to be changed, a lot of dismantling and whatnot, and I don't really see any difference. If anything, it gets worse. So yeah, that's what I got on it right now.
I think I also I really quickly want to, like, speak to what Justin said about Coretta Scott King and how often her legacy gets lost when we're speaking about MLK's legacy. Not like, and I think not a lot of people, it surprises me. I mean, it doesn't surprise me, but not a lot of people know that she was the backbone of the civil rights movement, or her and Black women.
And I'm sorry, I just want to interject. Dr. Coretta Scott King. Let's put some respect on her name. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, go ahead, Samra.
And I feel like a lot of her legacy just gets lost. And I think she's someone I often think about when MLK Day comes around, or the Black women who were just spearheading the civil rights movement just kind of get left out the narrative, right? Because when we're talking about the Montgomery bus riots, we don't actually think about the fact that it was Black women who organized those riots, who organized where people are going, telling people to go, like the logistics behind everything, right? So I think this day is also a huge reminder of this really just keeping the Black women in your thoughts, and how, like, they will always be the backbone. They're still always the backbone. Even thinking about Georgia and how what Stacey Abrams did there, and I'm thinking about all these little things and how often these Black women kind of just get left out the narrative. I think this day is a huge reminder of that as a Black feminist organization.
Thank you all so much, each of you, for sharing. I've been kind of thinking as also kind of watching the chat as folks are weighing in about everything you all have said about how Martin Luther King's work and legacy, often on this day and always, have been sanitized. And I think about that when I hear the way some people talk about social justice as well, or talk about the word social justice and intersectionality. And I'm kind of curious to hear from each of you. You know, we just asked, what does MLK's work and legacy mean to you? And what do what does that bring up? When you hear the word social justice and intersectionality, what does that mean to you?
Can you repeat the question one more time, Amy? I'm sorry.
Yeah, of course. And you're food prepping over there too. When you think of the word social justice and the word intersectionality, what comes to mind? What does it mean to you?
I think, oh my God. I think social justice is the word is so performative to me now. I actually stray from using it as much as I can, although I still end up using it a lot because we are doing social justice work. But at this point, especially 2020, the way this pandemic went down and the way all these protests went down, and now everyone supports Black Lives Matter, and now everyone cares about Black people, and it's just so performative. And I think that it just irks me to my soul, right? Because people are gonna post their Black squares on Blackout Tuesday and think they're done with their social justice for the day, or people are gonna talk about Black Lives Matter, but will refuse to talk about abolishing the police. Will actually do not want to exist in a world where we abolish the police or prisons, right? Which are the pillars of anti-Blackness and how we're still oppressing Black folks in this country and the world, right? So I think when I think of social justice, or when I hear that word, I do get a little annoyed. That being said, intersectionality, also a word very like overused at this point, is still something very inherent to our framework of what we're doing at the Black Feminist Project. We do not think it in an intersectional lens, right? Everything we are doing is centered in a way where we focus on Black women, trans Black women, Black femmes, queer folks, everyone who are and poor trans Black women, right? So at these different intersections, right? So when I'm thinking of the word intersectionality, I'm thinking of how we cannot, when we think about food justice, when we think about reproductive justice, we cannot think of these things without thinking about the intersections.
Yeah, I'm probably no, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Stephanie. Do your thing, baby.
Okay. I was gonna go back, piggyback on what Samara said. Basically, what I think of is experience of discrimination or oppression, like your own experience or whatnot. That's what I really think of it. I feel like go ahead. I lost my train of thought, Tanya. Sorry, go ahead. I'm gonna go after.
I'm gonna we all mirror what Samara said. You know, that there is a level of performativeness to it now, but I don't know. This may be an unpopular opinion, and it's not one I really worked out. So let me give you that disclaimer. But even in the performativeness of it, I think that there is a value even in that, though, right? I want to acknowledge how things in some ways have gotten worse, right? But also how I have a really hard time believing that if I could have a conversation with Harriet Tubman, who I keep an altar for, right? Like that's how much she means to me, right? Who I dressed up as one day for Halloween in grade school. And I went to school on the Upper West Side, which is a primarily white community. And all the kids teased me. They were like, Tanya dressed up like a slave. And I was like, I didn't dress up like a slave. I dressed up like a superhero, right? I have a hard time believing that if I could have a conversation with Harriet Tubman right now and show her this whole world, that Harriet would not be brought to her knees weeping, you know what I'm saying, by the gains of Black folk, You know, even now on this day thinking about it, I've been on the verge of tears all day. You know what I'm saying? Like I took a Peloton ride this morning with Tunde, and she had all of these amazing quotes, primarily from Black people. And when I think about not just, and specifically from the lens of Black women and femmes, we are not just the backbone of this movement. We the backbone, we the skeleton, we the head and the neck, right? And we have to think about the intersections of patriarchy even in our community, intra-communally, that Black women are not acknowledged as such, that queer people are not acknowledged as such, and that it is only Black men who continue to be held up as the figureheads of, you know, of the civil rights movement, right? Even now, because what we experiencing now with Black Lives Matter, this is the continuation of the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement didn't end. Let's think about this. My father can tell you about the civil rights movement. You think it just stopped in like 75 or something? There was a law, and then here we are continuing it. The civil rights movement is new, it's fresh. This just happened. This is still very much current history. And so those intersections are very much there. And I think what happens is that, first of all, that term is a term that was coined by a Black woman, Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, right? White folks and white feminism got a hold of it, co-opted, sanitized it, washed it down, made it something else. And now folks use that term with no real analysis on what it means. And I think that's what I struggled with the most around the term social justice and the terms intersectionality, particularly in a world where now it's all about like the 10-second blurb. It's about the 140 character tweet. It's about the caption where folks are, where this idea, it's about the TL semicolon DR, too long didn't read, right? This idea that we are not harnessing our ability to call all of this information that is literally right here at our fingertips, right? And really create an analysis around what is happening and what social justice has meant, what it currently means, and what it could mean, and really understanding why having an intersectional approach to the work that we do is paramount.
I feel like that there's nothing more to say. So I can't add to that.
Awesome. Stephanie, I don't know if you kind of said you might want to circle back. Any other thoughts?
No, yeah, it's basically like everything was already said. And even if I didn't even know that's what I wanted to say, she already said it.
That was it. Perfect. So I want to ask delve a little bit deeper into, you know, there's intersections upon intersections upon intersections. And one particular aspect of your work is working around the issue of food insecurity. So when you think about the intersectionality of food security and specifically race and gender, how do those aspects of people's identity factor into the work that you do? How do they affect the work that you do?
I don't want to be that person who's always going first, but I'm just gonna oh my God. I think I briefly mentioned this earlier. I don't think of this work if I'm not thinking about the intersections of Blackness and womanhood and queerness. And I don't think about food justice or food insecurity without thinking about what it means to center Black, queer, trans, poor, cash poor people. And I think kind of blows my mind that there are people doing quote unquote food justice work and don't actually engage with these intersections. I don't even know what that means. I don't know what food justice means when you're not thinking about the people who are the most marginalized, the most oppressed, and at the harshest intersections of life, right? There's a reason why Tanya founded this organization a decade ago in the middle of South Bronx, right? Like it wasn't out of like, it wasn't just her starting an organization to help other people, which was a huge part of it. It was to help herself. It was like to help her own. She's so shaped by her own experiences, right? The need to help herself. And I think while I find so much joy that she found this org, it makes me sad sometimes that your own experiences have had to lead you to the place where you feel the need that this is the only option, right? To do grassroots work, to be humanized in that way. So I think when I'm thinking of these intersections, when I'm thinking about race and gender, I don't think of food justice outside of that, you know? And specifically when we're in the South Bronx, we're mainly around, our community mainly consists of Black women, you know? So those are always at the top of my head when I'm engaging with this work.
And we're also the, you know, communities of color, mainly Black communities, are the communities that are malnourished, are the communities that are the unhealthiest. Currently, even right now, the Bronx is the unhealthiest county in the entire state of New York. Out of 62 counties, the Bronx has been 62nd 10 years in a row. We don't have access to healthy foods. And, you know, it upsets me that they put that Whole Foods in Harlem because whereas they thought that that was bringing, you know, healthy food to people in Harlem, the prices are ridiculous and they're astronomical. And you're in a poor area, no one can afford that. We have more Kennedy's Fried Chicken, any access to any fast foods we have scattered throughout our communities, right? Fast foods and liquor stores that you can always guarantee that's what's going to be in a Black community, because they don't care. So the fact that we have to do it on our own, it's ridiculous. There's structural roots of these disparities. So like what we do with the Black Joy Farm, growing food for the actual community. Like, I mean, think about, this is what we have to do to get healthy foods in our community, because we have no access. We have what's called food deserts, where you can go miles without finding healthy, nutritious food. And I'm just talking about, because we do have access, of course, to like vegetables and things, but they're not the most quality vegetables. And here in the Bronx, all the food that comes to New York City comes to the Bronx first. To the food, I don't remember the name of the town. You know what the name of it is right there in Hunts Point?
The food distribution center, which is ironically called the breadbasket, because it feeds basically all of the northeastern corridor, right? Like if you live in the northeastern corridor, your food don't came through Bronx.
Yeah, all food in New York City comes to the Bronx first. Yet the Bronx is the last we get the leftovers. That what sense does that make? Like, they don't care. So we have to take care of our own communities through this, and we really need more space. And, you know, like on a whole side note, I feel like every building in New York City should have a community, should have a garden on the rooftop, because, and you know, and everyone that lives in that building has access to healthy food. Everybody chips in, everybody goes up there, everybody learns something. This is what we do. We bring in the community, and we bring in Black mothers, their children. We teach them how to grow food. You can grow some food in your own window, you know, like,
Come on, Justin.
I'm just, but it's angering at the same time, because why are we here? Why do we have to do this? That's more of the question that I always pose, even when I'm doing it, and I love what I do. But at the same time, I'm just baffled as to why we actually had to come to this place and why we're here. But while we are here,
but we know why, Justin. Let's not ask rhetorical questions, right? James Baldwin, the prophet James Baldwin, told us, right? He said that there is a lot of money invested in your poverty. To be poor is expensive. That's the irony, right? That's the irony. Poor people spend more money. They spend a disproportionate more amount of their money on food. And yet you were told that you don't deserve quality food. I'm going to do a cooking demo for y'all in about 15 minutes. And in order for me to get canned black eyed peas, I had to call up Whole Paycheck, had to go right on my Amazon, my little phone. Now I'm looking at this and I got 3 bags of food and it cost me $244. And then they wouldn't even deliver to me. I had to get in my car and drive all the way down there to go pick it up. Listen, baby, listen, don't embarrass me in front of these good people. My boyfriend got in the car and went and picked it up. Tag. So the point is, however, that it is, this is intentional. This is not an accident. And I think for me, it's really frustrating when I'm in spaces and we talk about, let's go back to that word that you were talking about, Amy, intersectional, right? That how many of us are doing this work, right, around food justice, and we don't have a anti-capitalist lens. We don't have we don't have an understanding of what anti-Black racism looks like and all of the ways in which capitalism relies on it to be able to flourish, right? And so when we talk about this, folks will try to explain to me that it's not actually racism. It's not actually on purpose. What it is that the economics of A, B, and C prohibit these specific people from doing C, D, and F. Like I'm an idiot. Like I haven't experienced this. Like I haven't done this work. Like I don't understand. Like there is not actually a history, right, of capitalism being built on oppressing a very specific group of people, mainly Black people, right? And then profiting from that oppression. There is profit in feeding Black people and brown people crappy food. There is profit in that, right? We have commodified healthy food, right? We want to talk about food justice. We also have to talk about food sovereignty, right? And we have to talk about colonialism, right? And that the first step of oppressing people is disconnecting them from the land. And how many of us, even in rural spaces, do not have access to the land. That we are not even a percentage of Black farmers in New York State. There's not even a percentage of us, right? Like, it's like there's 55 Black farms in New York State. Not like there's 10%. The amount is so small, right? And so we have to think of, when we think about Pigford, which is, I would encourage all of you to Google it because it's been decades and decades that this has been going on a federal level, that talks about the ways in which the federal government intentionally bamboozled, stole, land from Southern Black farmers. And you can look it up, Pigford, Pigford, and how it took them like 40 years to get some reparations from the federal government. But there was really very little adjustment for inflation. And what at this point, the children and grandchildren of the folks whose land was stolen, it was minuscule, the amount of money that they got once it was all split up. And so this is not a thing that happened by accident. This wasn't just like, oh, you got the crappy end of the capitalist stick. Sorry for you. This is a system that has been intentionally constructed to make sure that capitalism only works if there's an underclass. Black people have become that permanent underclass. Michelle Alexander, through the lens of abolition and prison pipeline language, beautifully illustrates in accessible language how prisons literally just replaced the antebellum slave trade.
Thank you all. I'm not sure am I missing anyone from the Black Feminist Project that wanted to add anything more? Okay. So at this point, I really want to turn it over to the audience to be able to ask some questions. I just want to ask one more thing before we move into that section of today's workshop. What actions can participants of today's call take to best support your mission? And are there any volunteer opportunities available that folks on the call could participate in?
Transparently, put your money where your mouth is. Put your money where your mouth is. If you're talking about if you talking about that, the fact that you care for Black women, you care about food justice, you care about these intersections, put your money where your mouth is, because a lot of the grassroots organizations who are doing the valuable work for Black women to get the nutrient dense food that they need, to get the reproductive rights that they need, they're underfunded, and we're one of them, because people don't, at the end of the day, people don't care about Black led organizations, right? Or at least people outside of this immediate bubble that we have, So yeah, I think despite us having this very anti-capitalist lens, we still operate in a capitalist society. So we need the funds to support other Black folks. And so donation, I will be dropping our donation link in the chat, and y'all can feel free to donate.
I would actually piggyback on that and say, white people, put your money where your mouth is. My firm belief is that Black people, especially Black women and femmes, they pay every day. They pay every day in a myriad of ways of navigating these spaces. And as a grassroots group, I consistently see that poor Black women are the ones who step up. I have people who will crawl in my inbox and be like, girl, I only gave you $5 because I only got $15 in my account. But I believe so deeply in the fact that you are building a literal, an actual factual brick and mortar space where me and my child can come, or me and, during the height of this pandemic, Justin made sure, opened up the farm for me and my kid. And so while I don't have a lot, I'll give you what I got. And we are continually sustained by ourselves. But if you have an actual analysis on what that looks like for folks who don't have a lot of collective wealth, that only goes but so far. And so the reality is that we need to be really real about this. And I'm not gonna shirk from it, right? And I know that there are white people who push back and be like, well, I come from a rural background and I haven't experienced the privilege you're talking about. Privilege for white folks is not saying that your life wasn't hard. Privilege for white folks means that your life was not made harder because of the color of your skin. It doesn't mean that you never were disappointed. It doesn't mean that that you didn't have some stuff that you went through. It means that if you did get into trouble, 9 times out of 10, police didn't kill your ass on the way to the precinct because all of a sudden they had some irrational fear of your skin color. What it means is that when you go somewhere, you never have to doubt whether or not you were not given an opportunity based on what you look like. And so that means something in the society, right? And if we're talking about just the recent craziness that happened at the Capitol, it cannot be denied anymore. If you were in denial at this point, if you continue to misunderstand, it is willful. And so for me, I think that white folks have this your time to shine, right? Like y'all need to step up. Black, indigenous, people of color have given all the blueprint that you need to figure out how to undo the shit show that we are currently in. And so I would really challenge that white folks look at the ways in which they can use their disposable income, their time, their resources, and their access, right? Because it's not just money, it's all of those things, right? It's when my white colleagues have said, one of whom is on here, hey, Joel, hey, when white folks have said, I actually don't think it's appropriate for me to talk about this, but there is this woman in the South Bronx named Tanya, and I think that you should go talk to her about it. And before you go talk to her about it, I think that you should drum up an honorarium to make sure you pay her to come and talk about it. Right? That is another way in which white folks use their privilege to navigate spaces and to pull up other white folks on the foolishness that is white supremacy and start to dismantle those systems.
Also, really quick, volunteer opportunities. So our best time for volunteers to come forth is coming now, which is spring to summertime. We do a lot of food distribution during this time, which is spearheaded by Stephanie, our food box coordinator. And during this time, we love having volunteers at the farm to just help give out food, help make us food boxes. Outside of that, we just love also—
Justin is about to break down our new chicken coop. So we actually need folks next week if you want to come and hit something with a mask on, of course. 6 feet
That's
apart
true.
from each other. If you want to come and help us demolish our old chicken coop because we're replacing it with a new fancy schmancy bells and whistles 4-star chicken coop, then we would love for you to come and do that. Throw your email address in the chat. We will make sure, and just put email list. We'll make sure we put you on our email list. So even if you can't come next week, there are lots of ways in which Justin can use your help as we get ready to start prepping for our upcoming growing season. Sorry, Samra, go ahead.
No, you said it. So if you want to be more involved with the food box aspect, Stephanie's, I'll connect y'all with Stephanie. If you want to be in the farm, helping Justin actually take care of the farm, planting things, then he's your person. And either way, I will connect y'all to them.
Thank you all.
We're building out the AFCC, the Alice Fields Community Center. On our website, we have a wish list of stuff that we need for the space. In the coming months, we will need folks to come and help us paint, build things, you know, maybe knock things down. You know, the Alice Fields Community Center is going to have a childcare space in it, which in the coming years, you know, Stephanie's, you know, because folks who work with the Black Feminist Project, we believe deeply not in just come give us your labor, but also how can we as an organization that has access to funding dollars, how can we pour back into the folks who work at this organization? And so Stephanie wants to open up mental health clinics and is certified in childcare. And so we want to open up in the space a bona fide childcare space where we do free childcare for people in the community with little barriers. But in the meantime, when we initially open up, you know, think like Gymboree and the YMCA had a baby, right? So moms can come and bring their kids in spaces to read, you know, to just be in safe spaces, because we don't have enough of them in our communities that are unpoliced. And we are building out a commercial kitchen that will anchor the food box program and our mobile market. We will have a community space that's open to the rest of the community. And so we need this space to be, you know, top notch and comfortable and feel warm and cozy. And so as we build this space out this year, we're gonna need, you know, not just thoughts and prayers, but hands and fingers and toes to help us build it out. So please drop your email address. We will put you on the email list. And as those opportunities come up, Tendaji, who is our special events and social media director, who's not with us today, will make sure that they disseminate all that information to you.
Thank you all. And I see everyone putting their emails in the chat. We'll, on our end, make sure that we have the chat exported and make sure everyone who wants to be connected can be connected. So we're coming up to 6 o'clock, and I want to turn this over to Tanya for the service project, but for audience members, if you